Albert Dooley, a scientist, feels worried as he looks at all their unpaid bills and money problems. He glances up and sees his old college award for most likely to succeed. But now, his life doesn't match that title. He works an average job, supports a middle-class family, and struggles to make ends meet. Suddenly, his son Jimmy and Jimmy's friend Eddie come in. Eddie wants to sell a puppy for $50, and Jimmy asks if they can buy it. Albert says no, explaining that they can't afford a pet right now. Jimmy offers to work and even rent out his room, but Albert stands firm. Upset, Jimmy runs to his room. In the kitchen, Albert's wife, Katie, is making applesauce. A fan flips the pages of her cookbook, and without noticing, she adds the wrong ingredients. Albert comes in and talks with Katie about spending less. He suggests she stop buying new clothes, but she counters by saying they should save money by cutting his lunch allowance and letting her cook for him instead. After tasting her strange applesauce, Albert tries to keep his lunch money, but in the end, he agrees. The next morning, as Albert leaves for work, Katie hands him a homemade lunch. Jimmy reminds him that today is the last chance to buy the puppy. Luckily, Katie tells Jimmy not to bother his dad, who's already stressed. But Jimmy keeps trying and says he'll prepare a room for the puppy. He points out that their wealthy neighbor has a dog, so why can't they? At that moment, their neighbors, Mr. Finley Hooper and his wife Eunice, overhear them talking. Albert comments that Mr. Hooper works for the government in the Treasury Department and hints they live so well because of shady dealings. As Albert drives away, his car blows smoke into their yard, upsetting Mr. Hooper. Eunice tries to calm him down. On the way to work, Albert picks up his friend Fred, a lawyer. Just then, a horse buggy rushes past and nearly hits them. They try to scold the teenager driving it, but the buggy speeds off before they can say much. At work, Albert arrives at the psychobioresearch lab and greets the animals. When he walks past a chimp, he throws his homemade lunch in the trash and focuses on a duck. He tells the duck it's the last day of the experiment and it needs to do well. While Albert is busy, the chimp, Clyde, grabs the lunch from the trash and eats the applesauce. Then he passes it to the duck, who also eats it. When Albert notices, he's surprised the duck actually liked the strange applesauce. Suddenly, someone calls his name loudly. Albert panics and quickly moves the applesauce away, just as Dr. Gottlieb, the head scientist, walks in. The older man tells Albert to stop wasting time and start testing the animals. When Albert reaches for the duck, Dr. Gottlieb stops him, saying the duck already failed with a score of -11. Albert asks for one more try, explaining that animals learn in different ways. After thinking it over, Gottlieb agrees but warns this is the duck's last chance. Dr. Gottlieb watches closely as they test the duck again. Sadly, the duck gets every answer wrong by picking the wrong switch each time. Dr. Gottlieb says that's the end of the duck's part in the experiment. Just then, a tape of a dog barking plays, and the duck suddenly lays an egg. Albert tries to use this strange reaction to convince Dr. Gottlieb, but the duck runs off and heads into the radiology room. Inside, two scientists are doing their usual tests when they hear quacking. They turn and see the duck inside one of the machines. Shocked, they rush to get it out. While Albert is still looking for the duck, a radiologist returns it to him and warns that it almost turned into roast duck. Later, Albert brings the duck home since it has nowhere else to go. He plans to give it to Jimmy as a pet, but Jimmy, still upset, says he'd rather have a puppy. So Albert decides he'll give the duck to a nearby farmer who often passes by. Before he can, the duck starts following Jimmy around and seems to like him. Jimmy changes his mind, decides to keep it, and names it Charlie. Later, Albert and Katie hear Jimmy shouting for help. They run outside and see him trying to protect Charlie from their angry neighbor, Mr. Hooper, who's upset the duck got into his pool. Things quickly get out of hand as the Doolittle family tries to save the duck from both Mr. Hooper and his dog, Duke. Albert falls into the pool, swims to Charlie, and rescues him. Mr. Hooper, furious, hits Albert on the head with a pool skimmer. In response, Katie pushes Hooper into the pool. While the neighbor shouts, the family runs back home. As Duke barks from the other yard, Charlie suddenly lays eggs. A strange habit from the lab experiments. Later in the kitchen, the family talks about it. Albert thinks the dog's barking triggered Charlie to lay eggs. Katie is excited they can have free eggs, but Albert refuses to eat or use them, thinking they might be unsafe. Instead, he says he'll bury them in the yard. That evening, Albert digs a small hole and is about to bury the eggs when he accidentally drops one. Picking it up, he notices something odd. It looks like a golden egg. Just then, Fred walks up and asks what he's doing. Albert quickly hides the golden egg and lies, saying it's his own. Fred, confused, asks what he's doing. Albert changes his story and says he's looking for night crawlers. Fred gives him a strange look and suggests he get some rest. The next day, Albert runs a few tests on the egg. With each result, he becomes more sure that it might really be gold. Just then, Dr. Gottlieb walks in. Excited, Albert asks if radiation could ever turn something living into a non-living material. Dr. Gottlieb recalls one case where a medical student ran an experiment on an egg, and its yolk turned into something unusual. This catches Albert's attention, and he finally asks if an egg could turn into gold. The older scientist admits it's possible, but says it would take a huge amount of nuclear energy, far too costly to be useful. After work, Albert visits a specialist to get the egg tested. The expert confirms it's pure gold. Later, while driving home with Fred, Albert shows him the results. But Fred is skeptical and doesn't believe it's real. When they get home, Albert cheerfully greets Katie, but notices she looks worried. He tells her that the duck's eggs contain gold and that he's going to run more tests. Then Katie finally admits that she already gave the duck to a farmer named Pertham. Surprised, Albert rushes to find the farmer's address, digging through the cookie jar. Albert, Fred, Katie, and Jimmy all pile into the car and drive to the farm. There, Albert offers to buy the duck back. Pertham agrees and tells them to check behind the barn. But when they get there, they're shocked to see Charlie in a pen with hundreds of ducks that look exactly the same. Unsure which one is Charlie, Albert and Fred start barking, hoping the duck will lay an egg. Nothing happens. Jimmy, feeling sad, walks out of the pen. Without realizing it, he leaves the gate open, and all the ducks escape into the pond. The adults scramble to round them up, while Jimmy sits by the car, crying. Just then, one duck walks up to Jimmy and stays close. He hugs it and shouts that it's Charlie. To be sure, Albert barks at the duck. Right away, it lays an egg. Albert breaks the egg and shows Fred the golden center. Fred is amazed. Later, the two men talk about how to get more golden eggs from Charlie. They discuss what might affect the duck's ability and agree to keep everything secret, especially from government people like Mr. Hooper. Albert says he'd like to trade in his old car for a bright yellow convertible, but Fred warns him not to change anything too fast. They might draw attention. That night, Albert looks for a safe place to hide the golden eggs. He tells Katie that even though they could make millions, they need to be careful. He reminds her of Aesop's fables, where greed always leads to trouble. They quietly check on Jimmy and see him sleeping peacefully with Charlie beside him. Katie notices the window is open and asks Albert to close it so Jimmy doesn't get sick. Albert tiptoes in, shuts the window, and gently covers the duck, forgetting to cover Jimmy. Katie watches, clearly upset. Later, as they get into bed, Albert leans over to kiss her goodnight, but she turns away, feeling hurt that he seems to care more about the duck than their own child. The next day, Katie gets a call from Mr. Meeker, the bank manager, reminding her that their final loan payment is due. Worried and unsure how to get the money, she decides to use one of the golden eggs. She takes the golden yolk to the bank, hoping it'll help. But the bank doesn't believe it's real gold. Mr. Meeker tells her to take it to a refinery to confirm its value, so she heads there right away. After getting a $900 check, Katie quickly buys herself a new hat and later admires it in the mirror at home. Albert walks in and notices the hat. When he asks about it, Katie tells him the bank called and she paid off their loan. Curious, Albert asks where she got the money. She admits she sold one of Charlie's eggs to a refinery. Just then, Fred arrives and warns them that owning gold without a license could get them in serious trouble. Katie explains that when she told the refinery the gold came from a duck, the man just laughed and didn't take her seriously. Katie continues exchanging eggs for money at different refineries, telling the truth since no one believes it. Things go smoothly until Mr. Carter from Alco contacts the Treasury. As more reports come in, the Treasury, led by Mr. Rutledge, suspects a secret gold operation. Meanwhile, Mr. Morgan at the U.S. Bank is bombarded with calls from world leaders asking if America has discovered a new way to make gold. The president calls Mr. Morgan about the gold rumors and potential stock market manipulation. Morgan tells Rutledge to investigate and stop it. Rutledge reads the fake names Katie used at refineries, and Hooper recognizes one. It's his neighbor. Hooper spies on Katie, but his wife catches him, thinking he's watching another woman. Albert arrives and is confused by Hooper's overly friendly greeting. Inside, he asks Katie if she told Hooper anything. Then, Fred shows up in a yellow convertible, surprising Albert since they agreed not to make big purchases. Albert later reminds Fred that the duck's golden egg-laying may not last, as the radiation could wear off. Albert wants to test Charlie's radiation, so he asks Katie where the duck is. She says Jimmy took Charlie to the Wadlow brothers' house. At Wadlow's garage, Jimmy and the brothers are amazed by Charlie's ability to turn green and make electricity. Albert and Fred arrive, take Charlie back, and upset Jimmy. Later, Albert and Fred try to make Charlie lay more eggs, but fail. They discuss how to keep Charlie safe, while Jimmy overhears and realizes his dad cares more about the gold than the duck. Meanwhile, Mr. Hooper is spying on them. He sees Charlie lay an egg, but falls from a tree when Eunice catches him. Later, Hooper gives Jimmy a bike and asks about the duck laying eggs. Jimmy innocently explains that his dad makes Charlie lay eggs by barking at it. Hooper tries barking at Charlie, but the duck doesn't respond. However, when Hooper's dog barks, Charlie lays an egg. Hooper is excited, but Katie takes the egg and scolds him for trying to steal it. Katie tells Albert what happened. He tells her to hide Charlie and warns Fred. Meanwhile, Hooper reports to his supervisor about the golden eggs, but Rutledge doesn't believe him. Hooper vows to capture the duck to prove it. Hooper suddenly declares that the duck isn't really a duck. At the same time, the president calls, demanding the duck be captured after hearing about its golden eggs. Later, Albert and Fred argue with Katie over Charlie. Albert and Fred want to keep the eggs, but Katie worries about Jimmy and the duck's safety. Officials arrive with a search warrant, and Jimmy sneaks out with Charlie. The officials check his room, then begin searching for him. Jimmy hides in a washing machine on a truck, then moves to a garbage truck. A chase begins, ending when the convertible crashes into the official's car. The Wadlow brothers help Jimmy escape, while the Dooleys and Fred steal a truck to follow. The Wadlow brothers drive into a parking garage, where a ladder breaks under Jimmy's weight, leaving him hanging. Albert arrives, telling Jimmy to move to safety, but Jimmy refuses, thinking Albert only cares about the duck. When the ladder breaks, Jimmy calls out for his dad's help. Albert catches Jimmy just before the ladder falls, relieved his son is safe. However, Jimmy isn't happy. The officials take Charlie, and Albert is arrested for hoarding gold. In court, the judge asks for a demonstration of the duck laying a golden egg. Hooper barks at Charlie, but the duck doesn't respond, making him look silly. Albert steps up, barks correctly, and Charlie lays an egg, but it's normal, not golden. The judge dismisses the case due to lack of evidence. Later, the family leaves court happy, and Albert denies having a duck that lays golden eggs to the reporters.
Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and stay connected with us.